People always say that your first love is the one you'll never forget. For me, that wasn't because it was perfect. It was because I almost lost him because of my own fears. My name is Samantha, and this is the story of how I broke the heart of the only person who truly loved me, how I spent a year trying to heal from wounds I didn't create, and how fate gave me one last chance to make things right. I was 25 years old when I finally understood that not every person who loves you will leave. But to explain that realization, I have to go back years earlier, back when I was just a high school girl, back when I first met Clyde. The first time I noticed Clyde, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't the loudest boy in school. He wasn't the most popular. He wasn't even someone who constantly sought attention. He was just kind, the kind of person who made people feel comfortable around him. The kind of person who would help someone carry books without being asked. The kind of person who would listen when others were too busy talking. At first, we were just friends. Nothing special. Just two teenagers sharing conversations during breaks, laughing about subjects, and talking about our dreams for the future. I never imagined he would become one of the most important people in my life. And honestly, I don't think he expected it either. But little by little, our friendship grew. What started as casual conversations turned into daily messages. Those daily messages turned into late-night talks. And before I knew it, he had become the first person I wanted to tell whenever something good happened. He became my safe place. Or at least, that's what he tried to be. The problem was that I didn't know how to trust a safe place. Because growing up, safety never lasted. When I was younger, my father left. One day he was there, then he wasn't. Just like that. No explanation that made sense to a child. No goodbye that could soften the pain. Only an empty space that seemed to grow bigger every year. I remember waiting for him. Waiting for phone calls. Waiting for visits. Waiting for promises that never came. At first, I thought maybe he was just busy. Then I thought maybe something had happened to him. Eventually, I started wondering if I wasn't enough reason for him to stay. Children always find a way to blame themselves. I certainly did. And although I grew older, that wound never completely disappeared. I carried it everywhere. I carried it into friendships, into school, into every relationship, especially into my relationship with Clyde. When Clyde confessed his feelings for me, I was terrified. Not because I didn't like him. The truth was exactly the opposite. I liked him too much, and that scared me. Because the more you love someone, the more they can hurt you. The more important they become, the more painful it is if they leave. And in my mind, people always left, sooner or later. That was what life had taught me. So when we officially became a couple during first year in college, part of me was happy, but another part was already preparing for heartbreak. The first few months were wonderful. We laughed together, studied together, shared dreams together. Everything felt simple, easy, natural. Whenever I was with him, I felt lighter. Like all the sadness I carried became a little easier to manage. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future with someone. I imagined graduating together, building lives side by side. It felt nice, too nice. And that's when the fear started growing. Because every time I became happy, a voice inside my head whispered the same thing. Don't get used to it. He's going to leave eventually, just like everyone else. At first, I ignored that voice. But it kept getting louder, especially whenever we had disagreements. And every couple has disagreements. That's normal. The problem wasn't the arguments. The problem was how differently we handled them. Whenever Clyde and I fought, he wanted to fix things immediately. He hated sleeping while angry. He hated unresolved problems. He believed every issue should be discussed right away, no matter how long it took, no matter how late it became. He wanted us to talk until everything was okay. I know now that his intentions were good. But back then, it overwhelmed me. Because I was the complete opposite. Whenever I got hurt, angry, or emotional, I needed space. I needed time alone. I needed silence. I needed sleep. For me, resting helped calm my emotions. After sleeping, I could think clearly. After sleeping, I could communicate better. But Clyde saw silence as distance, and I saw persistence as pressure. Neither of us was wrong. We were simply different. Unfortunately, we didn't understand that at the time. As months passed, our arguments became more frequent. Not because we loved each other less, but because our fears kept colliding. And mine were becoming impossible to ignore. The closer Clyde got to me, the more afraid I became. I know it sounds strange. Most people become more secure when they're loved. I became more terrified, because I kept waiting for the moment he would decide I wasn't worth the trouble. The moment he would get tired. The moment he would walk away. Just like my father did. Looking back, I realized I was testing him. Constantly. Unconsciously at first. Then intentionally. I pushed him. I challenged him. I became difficult. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I wanted proof. Proof that he would stay. Proof that he was different. Proof that I mattered enough. The irony was painful. The harder he tried to stay, the more I pushed. The more he reassured me, the less I believed him. Because fear isn't logical. Fear doesn't care about evidence. Fear only cares about survival. And mine kept telling me, leave before he leaves you. Protect yourself before he hurts you. Don't trust happiness. It never lasts. Clyde didn't understand why I acted that way. How could he? I never told him the full truth. I never explained the depth of my fears. I never told him how much my father's abandonment still haunted me. Instead of opening my heart, I built walls. And every time Clyde tried to climb those walls, I added another layer, until eventually, even he became exhausted. The worst part was that I could see his pain. I could see how much he loved me. I could see how hard he was trying. And yet I still couldn't stop sabotaging our relationship. Sometimes I would start arguments over small things. Sometimes I would withdraw completely. Sometimes I would convince myself he was losing interest even when he wasn't. It was like fighting an invisible enemy inside my own mind. And no matter how much Clyde loved me, he couldn't fight that battle for me. Because the enemy wasn't him. The enemy was my fear. By second year, everything finally reached a breaking point. I remember staring at my reflection one night, looking at the person I had become, looking at the damage my fears were causing. And for the first time, I asked myself a painful question. What if I'm the one hurting him? Not intentionally, not maliciously, but still hurting him. The answer terrified me, because deep down I knew it was true. I loved Clyde, but I was also hurting him, and I didn't know how to stop. So I made a decision that would change both our lives. A decision that felt impossible. A decision that shattered my heart. I decided to let him go, not because I stopped loving him, but because I loved him enough to believe he deserved better than the version of me I was becoming. The day I broke up with him was one of the hardest days of my life, and as I watched the pain in his eyes, I wondered if I had just made the biggest mistake I would ever make. I had no idea that the next year would change everything. The day after I broke up with Clyde felt unreal. I woke up expecting to see his usual good morning message. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then reality hit me. We weren't together anymore. There was no relationship, no sweet messages, no late night calls, no plans for the future, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. I stared at my phone for a long time that morning. Part of me wanted to message him. Part of me wanted to tell him I had made a mistake. Part of me wanted to take everything back. But I didn't, because despite how much it hurt, I believed the breakup was necessary. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The first few weeks were horrible. I cried more than I wanted to admit. Sometimes while studying. Sometimes before sleeping. Sometimes for no reason at all. The smallest things reminded me of him. A song, a joke, a restaurant, a random photo. Even ordinary days felt different without him. I had become so used to having him in my life that his absence felt unnatural. Like something important was missing. Because something important was missing. Him. What made everything harder was knowing that I was the one who ended it. If Clyde had broken up with me, maybe I could have blamed him. Maybe I could have been angry. Maybe I could have convinced myself that he didn't care enough. But I couldn't. Because the truth was that Clyde had fought for us until the very end. He stayed, again and again, even when I pushed him away, even when I made things difficult, even when my fears created problems that shouldn't have existed. He stayed, and I was the one who walked away. That realization haunted me. There were nights when I reread our old conversations. I know I probably shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. I missed him. I missed hearing about his day. I missed his random jokes. I missed the way he always checked if I got home safely. I missed having someone who genuinely cared. Sometimes I would smile while reading our messages. Then I would cry a few seconds later, because those moments belonged to the past, and I didn't know if they would ever happen again. The hardest part wasn't just losing my boyfriend. The hardest part was losing my best friend. For years, Clyde had been the person I talked to about everything. When something good happened, he was the first person I wanted to tell. When something bad happened, he was the first person I wanted to call. Now every time something happened, I had to stop myself from reaching for my phone. I had to remind myself that things were different, that we were different, that I no longer had the right to expect him to be there. And every reminder felt like another heartbreak. Months passed. The pain didn't disappear, but it slowly changed. It became quieter, less overwhelming, still present, but no longer controlling every moment of my day. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts. Truly alone. No relationship, no distractions, no one to blame, no one to hide behind, just me. And honestly, that was terrifying. Because being alone forced me to confront things I had spent years avoiding, including the truth about myself. One evening, my mother noticed that I had become unusually quiet. We were sitting together in the living room. The television was on, but neither of us was really watching it. I was staring at nothing, lost in my thoughts. After several minutes, she spoke. "You still miss him, don't you?" I didn't answer immediately, because I knew exactly who she meant. Clyde, the person I thought about every single day, the person I still loved, the person I couldn't forget. Eventually, I nodded. My mother sighed softly. Not with disappointment, not with judgment, just understanding. You loved him very much, she said. I still do, I whispered. The words escaped before I could stop them. My mother's expression softened. Then she asked a question I wasn't prepared for. Then why did you let him go? I felt tears forming instantly, because I didn't know how to explain it. Not properly, not in a way that made sense. I was scared, I finally admitted. Scared of what? I stared at the floor. That he would leave me. The moment I said it out loud, the answer sounded ridiculous. Clyde had spent years proving that he wanted to stay, yet I had spent years preparing for him to leave. My mother was quiet for a moment, then she asked another question. Samantha, who actually left you? The room suddenly felt smaller. My chest tightened, because I knew exactly what she meant. My father, not Clyde, my father, the man who disappeared from my life, the man whose absence had shaped so much of my fear, the man I had spent years pretending didn't affect me anymore. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then my mother gently continued, "You've been angry at your father for years." I nodded. That's normal. Another nod. But you've been punishing yourself for his choices. That made me look up. What do you mean? She reached over and squeezed my hand. You keep expecting people to leave because he left. My throat tightened. You assume every man will hurt you because he hurt you. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Because every word was true. For years, I had convinced myself that my father's abandonment didn't matter anymore. I told myself I was over it. I told myself I had moved on. I told myself I was stronger now. But deep down, I was still that little girl waiting for someone to stay. Waiting for someone to prove that she was worth loving. Waiting for someone to choose her, again and again, no matter what. And when Clyde did exactly that, I didn't know how to believe it. That conversation changed everything. Not immediately. Healing never happens immediately. But it planted a seed, a realization. For the first time, I stopped asking why I was afraid, and started asking where that fear came from. The answer was painful, but necessary. Over the following months, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I journaled, I prayed, I spent time alone. I forced myself to examine the patterns I had created. The more honest I became with myself, the more I understood. My relationship with Clyde hadn't failed because he didn't love me. It struggled because I didn't know how to receive love without expecting abandonment. Every argument felt bigger because I wasn't just fighting Clyde. I was fighting old wounds, old fears, old memories, and Clyde never knew he was competing with ghosts from my past. The more I understood myself, the more guilt I felt. Not because I was a terrible person, but because I finally saw things clearly. I realized how many times Clyde had reassured me, how many times he had chosen patience, how many times he had stayed. And instead of feeling secure, I kept testing him. Testing whether his love had limits. Testing whether he would eventually leave. Testing whether I mattered. The sad truth was that no amount of reassurance could have healed me back then, because healing wasn't his responsibility. It was mine. As my third year began, life became busier. There were new classmates, new schedules, new responsibilities, new experiences. People assumed that college would help me move on. Some even encouraged me to start dating again. You'll meet someone new. You're still young. There are plenty of guys. I heard those words constantly, but none of them felt right, because despite everything, my heart still belonged to Clyde. I wasn't waiting for him because I expected him to come back. I wasn't staying single because I thought reconciliation was guaranteed. I simply wasn't interested in anyone else. Every time someone tried to flirt with me, I compared them to him. Every time someone showed interest, I remembered his smile. Every time someone tried to get close, I realized I wasn't ready. Not because I was stuck, but because my feelings were still genuine. I couldn't force myself to move on just because people thought I should. So I remained loyal. Not because we were still together. We weren't. Not because I was making a grand romantic gesture. I wasn't. I stayed loyal because my feelings hadn't changed. And pretending otherwise would have been dishonest. Sometimes I wondered what Clyde was doing. Whether he was happy. Whether he had moved on. Whether he was dating someone else. Whether he still thought about me. Those thoughts hurt. But I never reached out. I believed that if our story was truly over, I had to respect that. And if it wasn't over, life would find a way. At least that's what I hoped. By the end of my first year in college, something inside me had changed. The fear that once controlled me wasn't completely gone, but it no longer ruled my decisions. For the first time in years, I felt emotionally stable. I felt stronger, healthier, more self-aware. I understood my wounds. I understood my mistakes. And most importantly, I understood that my father's choices did not define my future. His abandonment wasn't proof that I was unlovable. His departure wasn't proof that everyone leaves. His actions belonged to him, not me. One night, while looking at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. The girl who broke up with Clyde in second year was afraid of love. Afraid of vulnerability. Afraid of being abandoned. The person standing before me now still carried scars, but she was no longer controlled by them. For the first time, I genuinely believed I deserved happiness. For the first time, I believed I deserved healthy love. For the first time, I believed someone could stay. What I didn't know was that life was about to test that belief. Because only a few weeks later, a simple game with friends would completely change my future. And one unexpected dare would bring Clyde back into my life. By the end of my 3rd year in college, I had finally found a sense of peace. Not perfect peace. Not complete healing. But enough to breathe again. Enough to wake up every morning without feeling like my heart was carrying 1,000 pounds. I had spent an entire year learning how to live without Clyde. Learning how to understand myself. Learning how to forgive the little girl inside me who had spent years believing she wasn't worth staying for. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. And honestly, I thought that chapter of my life was over. I thought Clyde and I had become one of those stories people remember but never return to. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. It started during a 3-day outing with my college friends. Our final exams had ended, and everyone wanted a break from assignments, projects, and stress. One of my friends suggested that we spend a few days together at a resort outside the city. Just a simple vacation, swimming, eating, taking pictures, making memories. Nothing serious, nothing life-changing. At least that's what I thought. The first day was fun. We spent hours swimming and talking. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about school. I wasn't thinking about responsibilities. I wasn't even thinking about Clyde. At least not as much as usual. My friends kept teasing each other, taking embarrassing pictures, sharing stories, laughing until our stomachs hurt. For a while, I felt like a normal 23-year-old girl enjoying life. And it felt nice. The second day was even more chaotic. Everyone became more comfortable around each other. The conversations became louder. The jokes became crazier. The teasing became nonstop. That evening, after dinner, we gathered around a large table outside the resort. The weather was cool. The sky was full of stars. The atmosphere felt perfect. One of my friends suddenly stood up. Let's play truth or dare. Immediately, everyone cheered. Some people complained. Some people got excited. But eventually, everyone agreed, including me. And fortunately, at first the game was harmless. Simple questions, funny dares, embarrassing confessions, nothing too serious. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was having fun. Then it became my turn. And that's when my problem started. Earlier in the game, I had already chosen truth. Unfortunately, I answered honestly. A little too honestly. My friends had asked me if there was someone I still couldn't forget. The moment they asked, I already knew what would happen. I could have lied, but I didn't. Maybe because I was tired of pretending. Maybe because deep down, I still carried his name inside my heart. So I answered, Clyde. The moment his name left my mouth, the entire group exploded. Oh my gosh, you still love him. I knew it. Samantha is still in love. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. My face became hot with embarrassment. I tried denying it, tried changing the topic, tried defending myself, but it was useless. They had already discovered my secret, the secret I had spent an entire year carrying. The game continued. Unfortunately for me, fate seemed determined to make my life difficult. When my turn came around again, I had already used my truth option, which meant I only had one choice left. Dare. The entire table immediately became suspiciously excited. And that should have been my first warning. The group huddled together, whispering, laughing, planning something. I already knew I wasn't going to like it. After several minutes, they finally returned. One of my friends grinned. You have to call your ex-boyfriend. The entire table screamed. I nearly choked. What? No, absolutely not. Choose another dare. Unfortunately, nobody agreed. You said you'd do the dare. You can't back out now. Rules are rules. I covered my face with my hands. My heart was suddenly beating so fast that it hurt. I hadn't spoken to Clyde in almost a year, an entire year. And now they wanted me to call him? I wanted to disappear. What do I have to say? I asked nervously. My friend smiled. The kind of smile that meant trouble. You have to say, come back to me. The words felt impossible. The entire table erupted again. Meanwhile, I wanted to cry. At first, I refused. Then they begged. Then they teased. Then they threatened to record me forever as the biggest loser in the group. Eventually, I gave up. Not because I wanted to, because there was no escape. My hands were shaking as I opened my contacts. Even after a year, I still had his number. I never deleted it. I never could. Just seeing his name on my screen made my chest tighten. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Memories flooded back instantly. The late-night conversations, the laughter, the arguments, the breakup, the healing, everything. Call him, call him, call him. My friends started chanting. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed the call button. The ringing felt endless. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Part of me prayed he wouldn't answer. Part of me desperately hoped he would. Then suddenly, the call connected. My entire body froze. Hello. The moment I heard his voice, my heart stopped. It had been a year. A whole year. Yet I recognized his voice immediately. Somehow, it still felt familiar. Comforting. Dangerous. Home. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My friends were aggressively motioning for me to continue. I swallowed hard. then finally spoke. Babe. The word slipped out before I could stop it. The moment it left my mouth, everything became silent, including my own thoughts. Babe, not Clyde, not his name, not a formal greeting, our old call sign, the name I used when we were together, the name I hadn't spoken in over a year, the name that revealed exactly how much I still loved him. My eyes widened in horror. My friends covered their mouths. Some of them looked ready to faint from excitement. Meanwhile, I wanted to jump into the nearest ocean. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard him inhale sharply, like he was just as shocked as I was. I quickly remembered the dare. Come back to me. Then I immediately ended the call. The moment the call ended, I buried my face in my hands. The entire group exploded. People were screaming, laughing, running around, acting like they had just witnessed the greatest moment in human history. Meanwhile, I was dying from embarrassment. Then my phone vibrated. Everyone froze, including me. Slowly, I looked down. One new message. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The sender was Clyde. With trembling hands, I opened the message. The moment I read it, tears immediately filled my eyes. His message said, "I'm always here waiting for you." A few seconds later, another message arrived. "I've been waiting for you to approach me." Then another. "And honestly, it's a good thing you lost that game." I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, reading the messages again, and again, and again. For an entire year, I thought I was the only one carrying those feelings. I thought I was the only one who still remembered, the only one who still cared, the only one who still hoped. Apparently, I was wrong. That night, after my friends finally stopped screaming, Clyde and I continued talking through messages. At first, it was awkward. How could it not be? A year had passed. A lot had changed. But strangely, some things hadn't changed at all. The conversation flowed naturally, like no time had passed, like we were simply finding our way back to each other. Eventually, he asked if we could meet in person. Not immediately, not impulsively, not because he wanted to rush. He simply wanted a real conversation, a genuine one, the kind we should have had years ago. I agreed. The day we met, I was nervous beyond words. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My stomach felt sick. My thoughts wouldn't slow down. What if things were different? What if he had changed? What if I had changed? What if we were no longer the people we remembered? Then I saw him, standing there, waiting, just like he always had. For a moment, neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. We simply looked at each other, taking everything in. An entire year of separation, an entire year of growth, an entire year of missing each other, all leading to this moment. The first thing Clyde did wasn't accuse me. He didn't complain. He didn't remind me of my mistakes. Instead, he smiled softly, the same smile I had missed every single day. And suddenly, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The words came out broken. "I'm so sorry." Tears streamed down my face. All the guilt, all the regrets, all the pain, everything I had carried for a year finally came crashing down. Then Clyde did something I'll never forget. He opened his arms, and without hesitation, I ran into them. The moment he hugged me, I completely broke down. I cried harder than I had cried in years, because after everything, the fear, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the healing, the loneliness, I was finally home. I understand now, I told him through tears. I understand why I was so afraid. He gently held my hand, and listened, really listened, as I told him everything. About my father, about my fears, about the wounds I never explained, about the year I spent learning how to heal, about how much I missed him every single day. When I finished, Clyde was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and said something I'll remember forever. "I know." I looked at him in confusion. He squeezed my hand. "I knew you needed time." Tears filled my eyes again, because instead of resentment, he had chosen understanding. Instead of anger, he had chosen patience. Instead of giving up completely, he had chosen hope. For the first time in my life, I truly believed someone could stay. And as I sat there holding Clyde's hand, I realized something beautiful. The girl who once pushed him away because she feared abandonment was gone. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to love without running. Enough to trust. Enough to stay. And this time, when life gave me another chance with the man I loved, I wasn't going to let fear take him away again. The first few weeks after Clyde and I got back together felt different from the first time we dated. Not because we loved each other less, but because we loved each other more wisely. The first time we were together, we were teenagers trying to figure out life. Now we were older, not old enough to know everything, but old enough to understand that love alone isn't enough. Love needs honesty, trust, communication, patience, and most importantly, healing. When we decided to try again, neither of us pretended the past had never happened. We didn't sweep our mistakes under the rug. We didn't act like the breakup never existed. Instead, we talked about it. Really talked about it. The kind of conversations that were uncomfortable. The kind that forced us to be vulnerable. The kind we should have had years ago. One afternoon, Clyde and I were sitting together in a quiet cafe near our university. The rain softly tapped against the windows. People around us were busy with their own lives. But for me, it felt like the entire world had disappeared. Because for the first time, we were discussing the year that changed everything. I nervously stirred my drink, then looked at him. Were you angry at me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Clyde looked down for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. Then he nodded. A little. The honesty didn't hurt. In fact, it comforted me. Because it was real. Not sugar-coated. Not fake. Real. But I wasn't angry because you left, he continued. I frowned. Then why? He gave me a sad smile. Because you carried everything alone. My chest tightened. What do you mean? You never told me how much you were struggling. His voice remained gentle. You kept protecting me from your pain instead of letting me help you carry it. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Because he was right. For years, I had treated my fears like a secret burden, something I had to manage by myself. Something nobody else could understand. I thought hiding my pain was protecting him. I didn't realize that shutting him out hurt him too. I'm sorry, I whispered. I know. His answer surprised me. There was no bitterness, no resentment, just understanding. And somehow that made me cry even harder. Over the following months, Clyde and I spent countless hours talking about everything. Our relationship, our fears, our mistakes, our hopes, the future, the past. Nothing was off limits anymore. And the more we talked, the stronger our relationship became. Because trust isn't built through perfect moments. Trust is built through honesty, even when honesty is difficult. One evening, I finally gathered enough courage to ask a question that had been haunting me for months. Clyde, what happened during that year? He looked at me curiously. The year we weren't together. For a moment, his expression softened, and I immediately knew he understood exactly what I was asking. Did you move on? The question came out quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Clyde smiled, then shook his head. No. My heart skipped. Why? His answer came immediately. Because I still love you. Simple, direct, honest, the kind of answer only Clyde could give. I felt tears threatening to return. You could have found someone else. He laughed softly. I know. Then why didn't you? He looked directly into my eyes. Because I wasn't waiting for someone else. The room suddenly felt too small. My heart felt too full. Then Clyde told me about his side of the story. About the nights he wondered if I was okay. About the times he wanted to message me but stopped himself. About how he respected my decision even when it hurt. About how he spent that year focusing on himself too. Growing, learning, healing, just like I was. There were times I thought you were happier without me, he admitted. The confession broke my heart. Because while he was thinking that, I was lying awake every night missing him. I wasn't happier. The words escaped immediately. He smiled. I know that now. The truth was that our separation had changed both of us. Not just me. Not just him. Both of us. We had entered that year as two people carrying wounds. And somehow emerged stronger, more mature, more prepared for the kind of relationship we actually wanted. Slowly, I noticed something changing inside me. Whenever Clyde didn't reply immediately, I no longer panicked. Whenever we disagreed, I no longer assumed the worst. Whenever he needed time for himself, I didn't interpret it as rejection. For the first time in my life, I wasn't constantly preparing for abandonment. I was learning how to trust, and trust felt beautiful. One night, while lying in bed, I found myself thinking about my father. For years, even hearing the word father had filled me with anger, pain, bitterness, resentment, but that night felt different. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was simply tired. Tired of carrying the weight of someone else's choices. The next morning, I sat alone with my journal, and I wrote something I never thought I would write. I forgive you, not because what happened was okay, not because it didn't hurt, not because I suddenly understood everything, but because I no longer wanted your absence to control my life. When I finished writing, tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't the same tears I used to cry. These felt lighter, freer, like I was finally putting down a burden I had carried for years. My father had left. That fact would never change, but his departure was no longer my identity. It was no longer the center of my story, because my story wasn't about being abandoned. My story was about surviving, healing, growing, learning how to love, and Clyde became a huge part of that healing. Not because he fixed me. No one can do that. Healing is personal. Healing is your own responsibility. But he walked beside me while I healed, and that made all the difference. As the months passed, our relationship continued growing stronger. The fear that once controlled me became quieter and quieter, until one day, I realized something incredible. I hadn't thought about being abandoned in weeks. The old version of me would have considered that impossible. One evening, Clyde and I were walking through a park after dinner. The sky was painted with shades of orange and gold. The sun was beginning to set. Families were walking together. Children were laughing. The world felt peaceful. Without warning, Clyde reached for my hand. I smiled and squeezed it. Then he looked at me. You know something? What? I never stopped believing in us. I laughed softly. You should have. No. He shook his head. Because even when you pushed me away, I knew you loved me. My eyes immediately filled with tears. Because after everything, he still saw the good in me, even during the moments when I couldn't see it myself. Years ago, hearing those words would have scared me. I would have questioned them, doubted them, analyzed them, waited for the catch, waited for disappointment, waited for him to leave, but not anymore. For the first time in my life, I simply accepted them, accepted the love, accepted the happiness, accepted the possibility that someone could genuinely stay. Later that night, we sat together watching the stars, talking about our future, our dreams, the careers we wanted, the life we hoped to build. Then Clyde suddenly smiled. You know, he said, what? I think you'd make a good wife someday. I immediately turned red. Clyde, he laughed. I'm serious. My heart raced, not because I was scared, because I wasn't, not anymore. For the first time, the idea of spending my future with someone didn't fill me with fear, it filled me with hope. I leaned my head against his shoulder, and quietly whispered something I never thought I'd be brave enough to say. Maybe you'll make a good husband too. His eyes widened, then he smiled, the kind of smile that made me fall in love with him all over again. And in that moment I realized how much my life had changed. A year earlier, I had let him go because I was afraid. Now I was imagining a future with him because I finally believed I deserved one. The little girl who spent years waiting for her father to come back was finally at peace. The teenager who pushed people away before they could leave was finally healing. The young woman who thought love always ended in heartbreak was finally learning that some people stay. As I looked up at the stars that night, I silently thanked life for giving me a second chance. Not just with Clyde, with myself, because finding him again was wonderful. But finding myself again was even more important. People often ask me what changed, how I stopped being afraid, how I learned to trust, how I learned to love without running away. The answer is simple. I stopped letting my past decide my future. I stopped punishing people for wounds they didn't create. I stopped expecting abandonment from everyone who cared about me. And most importantly, I finally stopped waiting for people to leave. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something beautiful. The right people don't stay because you make them. They stay because they choose to. And every single day Clyde chose me, just like I chose him. And this time, neither of us was letting go. Enjoyed the story? Please like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell for more heartfelt stories. See you in the next one.